Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 13th Annual Fast Company Grill. My name is Casey Ifeanyi. I lead the programming here at Fast Company and all their live events. So very excited to see all you here today. And we're kicking things off at the grill this year, talking about how leaders can stay agile during mass disruption. And it's going to be a really fascinating conversation. I got a wonderful panel here. And so to kick things off, I just want everyone to go down the line, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about your company.
Can you hear me?
There we go.
There we are. My name is Prashanth Chandrasekar. I'm the CEO of Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow is one of the world's largest software developer communities and platforms. We've been around for about 18 years. And we have a large enterprise presence where we have our knowledge base that's now being used by thousands of companies for internal agentic use, which I'm happy to talk about.
Howdy. My name is Sam Jordan. I lead computing and emerging technology for the Future Today Strategy Group, or FTSG. We are the firm that companies come to when they cannot afford to be surprised. So we specialize in something called strategic foresight, which is basically a disciplined way of navigating the future, creating a vision, and creating a plan.
My name's Peter Smart. That is my real name. So I lead Fantasy. We are a pinnacle digital product team. So we work with the world's biggest companies to ship their flagship digital products. And so in this moment of change, where value is being rewritten, we help companies figure out where's the new locus of value moving, and then help them ship it today. That's our job.
So again, we're here to talk about how to stay agile during disruption. And of course, AI is one of the main forces of disruption at the moment. So I'd love to start with everyone's point of view on the current landscape of AI. What have you seen that is BS or worth ignoring? And what have you seen that's actually disruptive and worth paying attention to? Prashanth, we can start with you.
Yeah, happy to go. I think we, just in terms of context, we have a fairly decent view of what's going on, because on our public platform, we've had, like I said, 18 years worth of knowledge that's been created on every possible technology question. And that's something like 70 billion tokens of information, something like 90 million questions and answers on the platform on everything technology. And all that data now is being used by the LLMs for pre-training and for AI answers, et cetera, which, if you're a technologist, you're likely using our data under the hood. And so in terms of the hype versus what's real, I think this phenomenon is absolutely real. I mean, we just have to be 100% accepted that this is here to stay. It's a tectonic shift. It's sort of once in a generational type of change. It's not. I think stating there's a platform shift is an understatement. It's more like a complete new ability to actually do things, which is more akin to maybe the internet or maybe even electricity back in the day. So that's how I think about it, versus like a cloud platform shift, which is, I think, much, much smaller. And this is going to have some massive ramifications, but it's going to take some time to work its way through different functions, different industries. And so when I think about hype, I think it's maybe the hype exists where people are overstating where the capability is today. When you think about, can you trust the answers? Can you really trust it in your workflow? If you're a professional in a particular part of the organization, let's say, if you're in the finance and legal departments, do you feel 100% confident that you could use AI to go a lot faster? The answer is maybe in certain circumstances and use cases, but definitely not in all circumstances. Because there's still hallucinations, there are all those sort of things that you have to deal with, and the trust is a very, very important topic. So generally speaking, but one other point on the other extreme, with something like coding, it absolutely is being used very extensively. 90% of our users on Stack Overflow use AI in some fashion for code generation. So it just depends on the function and the use case. Definitely not hype in the grander scheme of things, for sure.
Yeah. Sam, what are you seeing?
Yeah, so I think there are kind of two ways that I'm seeing this value emerge in ways that are exciting to me. The first that I think is certainly not hype, where there's real value, is the individual empowerment story. I'm sure that everyone in this room has used AI tools to do things that you could not have done a year ago. I mean, I could not code 1 year ago, and today I can make an app in 45 minutes, basically. It's not going to be a good one. It's going to have to spend a whole day on the app. But I think of my fiance, who is getting his MD, PhD, and he's like a wet lab guy. He is a biologist, and now he doesn't really need a computational biologist. He can do all this stuff himself. So individual empowerment, I think, is absolutely value that we are seeing now. In the very near future, where I see the value emerging is in the coordination problem. So, now I am a principal and I have agents. I'm not talking about AI agents. I'm talking about the agents that represent me in Congress and the agents that are my financial institution that are supposed to represent my interests. Today, they can't perfectly represent those interests, but I think with agentic systems, we're going to get much closer to being able to capture that coordination. So if there's any econ nerds in the room, if you think of like Ronald Coase is smiling up at us now for reducing those transaction costs. Where I see the hype or where I tend to roll my eyes is when I hear people talk about AI as one thing arriving all at once. When people talk about AGI, this is the moment where it happens. I don't think that it's going to happen all at once. I think that it's going to be something that emerges and emerges differently in different places in the economy.
Yeah, no, I think similar answers, but just if we just rewind time and we think about what happened in the Industrial Revolution, it was the exact same thing, where machines came along and we had the exact same conversation as a human species. Is this hype? Are these things really going to replace us? And I think hype maybe is the wrong way of thinking about it. I think it's actually about zooming out to say, hey, this is a fundamentally transformative technology. Do we really know how best to apply it just yet? I think the answer to that is we're still learning how to use this technology incredibly well. And I want to give us like a very kind of practical example of probably, I think, the biggest problem that I see, which is that AI is treated as a panacea. Like it's going to solve all of our problems for us, to your point, Sam, like all at once. But if we just look at Hollywood, for example, and probably just distinguish the real value of AI, AI is silicon thinking, but there's also biological thinking. Like that's us. You can use an incredible video model like Seedance to produce incredible visuals on a screen, but can it tell an amazing human story that resonates in your soul? That's biological thinking. And there's a difference between intelligence, insight, and instinct. And I think that AI is really good at intelligence. And I think where people see it as hype is where they ascribe to AI the hope that it can be both insightful and instinctual, and it can't. And so AI makes mistakes, and it doesn't live up to our expectations. But I think if you zoom out and you just raise your altitude up to the what's happening to our ability to be productive, to orchestrate, to define novel answers, to radically create efficiency in our lives, this is transformative. This is the most transformative technology that we as human beings have ever made. We have to figure out how to best use it and not over-ascribe to it what only is uniquely human. And I would say that's the way that I would go.
Absolutely. And, I'm curious, because Peter, I want to stick with you for a second, because I know at Fantasy you work with massive companies like Apple, Google, Disney, Nike, Microsoft. So what's the biggest mind shift leaders have to make when they're looking to adopt new technologies?
Yeah.
Why are you laughing?
Well, I just have so many strong opinions about this.
I want to hear all of them.
Super keen to hear about this as well. I think there's two types of company in the world right now, and I don't know if you guys feel like you're in one of these two companies or not. There are companies where there is an absence of leadership in this moment, where there is almost an overly democratic response to the answer, like what does AI mean for our company, where it's up to the team to try and figure it out, and leadership is just hoovering up those answers and aggregating them. And I think in those environments, there's a lack of coherence. And I think for companies that are accelerating in this moment, the key word is coherence, and that coherence starts with great leadership. And I think it's ultimately up to leaders to determine what does this technology mean for our organization. I think without that, you aren't really getting to the fundamental root of what this technology can mean for you. AI wasn't created to take better meeting notes. Like, that is not the purpose of AI. But if we think again about massive technology companies, Hollywood, it can create fundamentally new forms of value as quickly as it's replacing the value that you produce today. And so I think it's up to leaders in these environments to create the conditions for coherence where they have really clear vision for what this technology means, and then to create the frame for their organization to start accelerating towards that. And I think just in my day-to-day lived experience, there's a very marked difference between those who have sought that external support and brought that expertise in to help them figure it out, with those who are still trying to aggregate it from just different perspectives across their company.
Wait, if I may.
Of course.
Because what I'm going to say is kind of piggybacking off of this. How many of you are familiar with the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise?
Oh.
I promise that this is relevant. I don't know if it's the second or third movie, but Jack Sparrow has this compass, and the compass is supposed to point him towards the thing that he wants. And in the movie, all of a sudden, he doesn't know what he wants. And the compass is spinning around, and he's sort of aimlessly going in different directions, really going wherever the wind takes him. And I think of this with a lot of companies right now. I think a lot of companies are quite aimless. They don't really know what they want to become. So we're seeing a lot of Jack Sparrows right now. When I think of resilient organizations, the ones that are most positioned for change, this may sound counterintuitive, but I think of companies like Berkshire Hathaway, and I think of the Catholic Church, and I think of the U.S. military. These are organizations that aren't, you wouldn't describe them as agile, for sure, but they are opinionated, and they do have a vision, and I think that that's the most important thing right now.
I think, building on that is just, if you are very clear on your purpose, those examples being, nice examples of that, then how you deliver that value can change. I'm a designer. The purpose of a designer is to imbue value into a product. How a designer has shown up in the world 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 10 years ago has fundamentally changed. It's always going to change. But if you're very clear on your purpose, you can then figure out how to apply this technology to do that purpose in a new way. And I think those are great examples because the fundamental dogma doesn't change, but how we do it changes. I don't know if you do that in Stack Overflow.
I have a question for you on this topic because I know in a previous interview, Prashanth, you said that you described the moment inside Stack Overflow as code red whenever ChatGPT was emerging, because obviously this is hitting your industry, your business really hard. And so for you, as a leader of this company, of this big company, like what did that disruption teach you? Like, how did you pivot? How did you move?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, so like I said, we've been around for 18 years, and definitely the most dominant knowledge base for technology for throughout that period. And then in 2022, when ChatGPT came out, we realized that all the data that we had generated through human contributions through our community of 100 million people was now being used by them and other AI companies. So very much a moment of you can call it the code red moment. I might have used a different term in the moment, but definitely it was absolutely jarring because you have to then figure out what is the mission and purpose of your organization. Why do you exist? What value do you provide to society, to our users, to companies that we serve? And so it's very much like a refounding moment for the company. So that's effectively what we had to do. And I had been through this a couple other times where, I used to work at Rackspace, so it's one of the reasons I moved to Texas, back in 2012. And back then, Amazon Web Services through the cloud had disrupted the traditional managed hosting industry, if you folks remember that. And that was a similar moment where you have to then figure out exactly how do you get out of that as an incumbent. And one of the ways you do that is to carve out a very autonomous team that is purpose-built to almost think of it as like you don't have the pressures of the existing business. You're just going as like a brand new company inside your company and going and disrupting yourself to go do something. So that's effectively what we did at Stack. When ChatGPT came out, we carved out a team of about 10% of the company, and we basically said, we are going to give this team complete autonomy to go after it. We're going to measure them completely differently compared to the rest of the organization, different incentives, and go and think about how we're going to use AI to solve customer problems, user problems, not just for the sake of using it. And let's have a very specific timeline to do that. So I put a stake in the ground where we said by the summer of 2023, we were going to announce to our user base what we're actually doing with AI. And so we had a sprint from, let's call it January-ish to July, where we had this team of, the 10% of the company that was just cranking away every week, and we said, don't come out until you actually figure it out. I personally ran product at that time also, because I think it is very difficult to delegate something as fundamental as what's going on, right? So you have to be sort of in the trenches with your folks. So so a lot of change, a lot of disruption, not for everybody, not for the faint-hearted, and if you're not going to embrace doing things differently and being adaptive, then you're going to be very, very much in trouble. So that was the Code Red moment, and since then we announced our AI products in the summer. We also then went and partnered with every single AI lab that had leveraged our data and wants to leverage our data. So we did partnerships with OpenAI, we did partnerships with Google, all the big cloud hyperscalers, and we effectively now have data licensing partnerships with them where they pay us for access to our corpus of data on the public platform for historical and ongoing access on a recurring basis. So foundationally, financially, we're in excellent shape as a function of that. And then our enterprise business, what we started noticing over the past, let's call it 18 months, is we have what we used to call Stack Overflow for Teams, which is a private Stack Overflow inside the largest organizations and companies. And we started noticing that the APIs of that product were red hot inside companies. And when we went to talk to them, they said they were using it to power their AI agent experiments and assistants that were going and answering Slack channels and support tickets and all these sort of things. And that gave us insight to say, we should be building the next generation version of that product meant for AI agents. So then we went and built that over the past 18 months, and we launched that this past year as something called Stack Internal, which is now the knowledge intelligence layer that companies use to hoover up relevant context from within all your various interactions, agent interactions, Slack interactions, your documents, and produce this very valuable context that then can be reused by other agents, because again, the team-based problem has not been solved. So we believe we can be the authoritative context layer for enterprises to use AI agents. So, and by the way, we're not done yet, meaning this world is just continuing to accelerate. It is only the early innings. I think we're talking less than 10% adoption across the world, right? I'm talking about just if you think about the population with AI. So this is technology, get used to it. There's going to be multiple more waves on this topic, and it's here to stay.
Yeah. And building off of that, I want to hear from Sam and Peter on this. Like, off of that example that Prashanth just laid out, like, how can leaders make confident decisions when the ground beneath them is always moving?
I would say leaders, C-suite, they're as human as everyone in this room. They are as fallible. They don't know where the future is going definitively. Prashanth doesn't. Sam doesn't. I don't. But
what are you talking about? I don't.
You
No,
do.
I don't.
But it is your job to figure it out. Like, as a leader, I think the first thing that you have to recognize, I love the example that you gave, is you cannot defer that weight of responsibility to be the individual or individuals who are creating the conditions for clarity and coherence for your company. That is job number one as a leader. And job number two is then to lead with empathy and say, in figuring this out, we're going to be answering some very hard problems and some difficult challenges, which fundamentally might rethink the way that we deliver output today, the value that we produce today, what we're putting out into the world today, and the jobs required to do that. At the same time, that you are then committed to developing a new vision for your organization that serves human beings the same purpose, but in a brand new way. And I would say the advice that I always kind of give to leaders, I think Prashanth is a great example of this, is being in the trenches with your team, but starting small. Just to give like one very tactical example at Fantasy, I've got folks here in the room today who are doing precisely this. We have done the very similar thing. We've siphoned off a portion of the organization who there is no rules and there's no relying on past ways of doing things. It's just, here is the value that we have as this pinnacle digital product team, but what is that going to mean in 2 years from now? How will we deliver it? Let's go figure it out together. And starting with a really small group of people for whom, and this is what I would say is so important, number one, have the awareness of what's actually happening with the technology. it's actually sometimes very, very difficult to source that inside your organization. And sometimes you actually might need to bring in experts from the outside to help you figure out what's happening. Two, who are aware of the adjacencies of what's happening. I give the example of Nike and One Medical in the future are way closer to each other then than they are today, but have they realized it just yet? Because the locus of value and their purposes in the world are so related to each other. They look so different today, but give it a couple of years and they're going to look very similar to each other. And so having people who can bring diverse perspectives to what it is that you do and the way that you show up in the world. And then a group of individuals for whom, if the answer is, hey, in this new future, my job doesn't exist anymore, they're okay with that because they have the resiliency to understand that the value that I produce today isn't who I am. What I actually output is not who I am. It's my ability to creatively problem solve, think differently, to bring the inimitable human ability to conceive of the new, and I'm just going to apply that mindset to new problems. So if you can create that really small group of people, and I hope this is really practical for folks, if you can create that really small group, then you create the conditions where there are no wrong answers, and you can go and come up with hypotheses. And I think there's a big difference between hypotheses and vision. Vision, where it's unverified, is dangerous. And I think there's a lot of executives out in the media right now talking about how their industry is going to be transformed with nothing really to kind of back it up, number one. And they're talking about pipe dreams, number two, in which they have imbued to AI this infallible ability to do everything. It's very dangerous. I think what you need as a leader are hypotheses for where your company is going so that you can go and validate those hypotheses very quickly so that you can then confidently then go to your organization. And my last point is this: not all at the same time, but in cascading increments of organizational change. And I talk about something called the 3 R's, which is reorganize, rally, and then realize. And you want to do that with cascading increments of your team. You want to start with that really small team who figure something out, validate that it's actually a viable path for this organization to be on, treat it like a pilot, and then apply it to the next wave of your organization. You don't do it all at one time. Your organization will experience ontological shock, and you don't have all the answers yet, and you've not fully realized your hypotheses and validated it just yet. You have to do it incrementally. And so I see leaders who are really struggling to create the conditions, and I would just bring it back to one word: coherence. Like, bring it back to clarity and coherence for your team, and that starts with you, like as a leader, and bringing in external perspectives and people within your organization who might look very different today, but who have the mindset that we're describing here to like work on these really novel challenges and these really kind of new ways of thinking. Folks who can do first principles thinking. I think that's super smart. I know, Sam, what you would add.
Yeah, and to do that, easier said than done. One of the ways that I think is like just a practical thing is you have to change the incentive structure. Because right now leaders are not incentivized to do that. They are not incentivized to have hypotheses and test them. They are incentivized to meet what their shareholders expect of them. So the incentives have to change. You have to like figure out ways to reward experimentation and testing. The other thing that I would say to this point, when things feel really chaotic, it usually means that something much more structural and fundamental is shifting. I think of the decade of the 1960s. It was so chaotic. We had Vietnam, we had multiple wars, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis, we had presidents being assassinated, we went to the moon. There were so many things going on the surface. It was very easy to get distracted. But the companies that won realized that it wasn't those headlines that you have to be paying attention to. It was the fundamental order of work and identity that was changing. So to give you an example, the public reaction to Vietnam was very different than the public reaction to Korea. And one of the reasons for that was because of the introduction of the television. The television changed how people consumed media. So that pipeline of trust between institutions and the public and governments and news organizations, that pipeline started to change. So what I would say now, I feel like now sort of feels like the 1960s a bit, and that there's so much chaos, there's so much stuff happening on the surface. So in addition to doing what Peter just said, in addition to changing the incentive structures, it's like you have to get really, really disciplined about asking what is actually changing, what is the thing that's actually shifting.
Feels like 1960 in more than one way, but
let's bring back the fashion.
I'm just saying. But I think Sam, I want to stick with you for a second because I know later in South by you're giving a talk about basically kind of what we're discussing right now about like how leaders are kind of running backwards, and so I and the framework of that discussion is like historically industries have followed a very linear process with like research and building and testing, and now we have like AI modeling and digital prototyping, so that sequence is inverted. So how can leaders rethink their workflows when experimentation is like happening in a completely different way?
Well, thank you for the plug. I hope you will all come to my speech on
Listen,
Monday.
I saw it and I was like, I want her for this panel.
Thank you.
So there you go.
Thank you. Well, okay, so this audience is going to get sort of the TLDR of this. You're going to get the key takeaway that I'm going to give on Monday, so don't tell anyone, although I think this is getting put on the internet, so that's okay. Okay, so one of the things that I'll be talking about is I've identified 3 pipelines that I think are shifting now. One is the way that we build things. The order in which we build things is changing due to technologies like our ability to simulate in virtual reality. We're getting really good at that. Which means that learning can happen so much earlier. That's changing the build pipeline, which changes the skills that are required, the people that are required. Another pipeline that's changing is the discovery pipeline. How we are discovering things about the world is changing. And then the last pipeline, which is probably the most important pipeline, is the talent pipeline. There has been a very specific order through most of human history of how you cultivate talent. You have a junior do the grunt work. They have mistakes. Those mistakes get corrected. And eventually, they build character and skills. And once you build character and skills, then you can be a leader. But as we are seeing on the news right now, so much of this work is being automated. So it's not just I'm worried that we're going to lose some of these skills. We're hollowing out the skills for later leadership, but we're also hollowing out some friction points that were important to creating character for leaders. So one of the key points of these pipelines, the argument is not to forego the new pipeline. The argument is not to slow down and not adopt the new technology. You absolutely should adopt the technology. The question that I would ask leaders to start thinking about is what are some of the byproducts of those old pipelines that we're going to lose with technology? For instance, sometimes friction is good. Sometimes friction creates character. Sometimes efficiency is not always optimal. So how do you put those unintended byproducts back into the new technology pipelines?
I love that. And oh God, within like the 2 minutes that we have left, this has been such an engaging conversation. I want each of you to just really give me that top lesson in how leaders can stay agile, because we've covered a lot of ground, but I really would love for everyone to just have like some solid takeaways from each of you on like what is that top lesson, top tenet on how leaders can stay agile during disruption.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, the rate of change is extremely high. It's never been as high as I can't remember a time when it's been this dynamic. So staying very, very agile with a constant learner mindset, being able to be flexible in your point of view, I think loosely held kind of points of view I think are good, because I think things could change. Your fundamental assumptions could massively change very quickly, because the rate of innovation with chips, the rate of innovation around AI models, hallucination rates getting lower, all those things, you're having to be some sort of a soothsayer to assume where the world's going to be in, even a year from now, really. And that's extremely unnerving. And as we were describing before, the ground is constantly shifting. So I think the best way to do that is to be rooted in your mission and your purpose. Why are you here on this earth as a company? To serve your user base, your customer base, and make sure that mission is still relevant. I mean, to be honest, like you may have to refound that mission and not be scared to do it. It's going to be noisy. It's going to be messy. It's going to be like, oh my God, but we've been that way for like 30 years. Maybe, but do you want another chapter or do you not? And so I think being very brave, fearless, to do that, I think is very important. We had a mantra at Stack Overflow this past year around being fast, focused, and fearless, which is fast because things are constantly changing. So how do you incorporate those daily learnings into your thesis, into your hypotheses, so you're constantly updating your assumptions, and at the same time being fearless about the fact that you may have to change completely to go and redefine your company while you're learning about all these new things. So I think it's a mentality shift. There's a wonderful book about mindset by Carol Dweck. It's called Growth Mindset, if you folks have not read it. I think that's a very important book to read in this moment because it tells you it's nothing personal to you. It's not about you. It's not, you have to constantly just be okay with being wrong because a lot of your assumptions are going to be proven to be untrue. And you just need to just roll with the punches and keep learning and keep moving forward with resilience.
Sam?
I know we're at time, so I will just say, do not forego judgment for efficiency. And I will leave it at that because we are at time.
Love it. Peter, bring us home.
We live in existential times across every single company and industry. It is incredible to me that a team of 3 people using AI video models can compete with a major Hollywood studio to have their content bought by Netflix. And so the entire order of companies and the way in which they deliver value and the entire business models that they've been built on for the last few decades or longer are being rewritten in front of us. And the number one thing that separates organizations that are going to navigate this moment well and navigate the existential crisis and those who won't will be coherence. It's the size of your team is actually no longer a benefit. How well resourced you are is actually no longer a benefit. The new agility is coherence. Can you create the conditions by which it's very clear what we do, what the value is that we produce, and how we're going to get there? That's why teams of 3 people are superseding teams of 3,000 people, because coherence is so much easier with a smaller group of people. And so as a leader, again, there's playbooks for this, but creating the coherence for your organization, clarity of vision, and then the frame by which you're then inviting your organization in to start accelerating towards that future. I think probably all of us in this room here are in one of those 2 companies. And I think look for the companies like Stack Overflow and others where there is that coherence. And if you don't have it in your organization today, fight for it. Try and bring in help to support you creating that coherence. It doesn't take a long time, but it's going to be the difference between existential crisis and success and crisis and collapse.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate it. Give it up for this amazing panel. Thank you.